Good morning. I'm Lee Anderson, a member of the parish committee here at First Parish, and I welcome you here whether you're online or in our beautiful sanctuary. Special welcome to visitors who are here for the first time or second time. Please join us for coffee downstairs after the service. And a special welcome to John Bailes, who is going to be participating in our service. He's Stephanie's friend from the days when they worked together in the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life at Wellesley College. He is a Zen Buddhist master teacher, and we welcome him and look forward to hearing from him during the service. Our mission is to build community, search for meaning, deepen our spirituality, and work together for a better world. To learn more about First Parish in Wayland or Unitarian Universalism, please visit uwayland.org or contact Kate Holland, Director of Lifespan Education and Engagement. Please also reach out to a member of the parish committee or to Reverend Stephanie if you have ideas or questions about First Parish. A big thanks to all our other service participants whose names are in the order of service. Please note that Middlesex County currently has a medium risk for COVID, so we recommend that people mask. Any service participant that unmasks has tested negative for COVID this morning. Please join me now in taking a moment to say hello to one another, including a wave to the front camera so people online can see you. And just one more piece of information. Our heat is not working in the sanctuary or down in the vestry right now, but we've got a team of people working on it. So if you're a little chilly, just put your coats on. And now we have an announcement from Jay Woodruff.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jay Woodruff. As part of the parish committee, I have been working as liaison with Arts Wayland, a group of volunteers who work to bring music and other art opportunities to our town. First Parish is providing a performance space for Arts Wayland artists to perform by sponsoring small group jazz and classical music concerts here in the sanctuary. This partnership with Arts Wayland is one of the first fruits of the church's visioning project started a little over a year ago, triggered by our members' interest in having First Parish reach out and connect more completely with the Wayland community. Just last Sunday, we hosted a third concert with Arts Wayland in the sanctuary since October. And next Sunday, a week from today at 3 o'clock, we'll have a jazz event featuring Dominic Eade, very well-regarded vocalist and songwriter, First Parish's own Neil Olmsted, a pianist, author, and 40-year educator at Berklee College of Music, and bassist Barry Smith, another seasoned jazz pro from the area with ties to Berkeley. Classical music follows in March. Our part of the country is fortunate to have one of the deepest rosters of classical and jazz musicians in the United States. First Parish and Arts Wayland are taking advantage of our area's cultural riches, teaming to give these artists an opportunity to play professional level concerts in our community. And now our service will begin.
Hello and good morning. My name is Alyssa Lee. I'm the ministerial intern here at First Parish. And no, the order of service is not incorrect. Unfortunately, Reverend Dr. May tested positive for COVID, so I am jumping in to take over. So as you will see, we all take COVID precautions very seriously here, and anyone who is unmasked, like myself and then our guest speaker, have tested negative this morning. Today we are going to turn our focus onto Buddhism. Rooted in the teachings and experience of an ancient figure, the Buddha, the traditions now expand in multiple ways around the globe. In this time together, may we be present to this moment, to our own shared experience of this time, place, and people. May we calm our minds and the many thoughts as we open ourselves to learning something more about the Buddhist traditions. I'd now like to invite the Knowlton Foley family to lead us in our covenant and light our chalice. If you will turn into your teal hymnal, we're going to have hymn 1009, and Charlie Anderson's going to come up and lead us in that.
This one is not specifically around, but we're going to divide it up anyhow. And our job downstairs is to be the drone. And the drone is the single note that keeps going on and on that you hear in the bagpipe, and then the melody takes shape around it, or in the hurdy-gurdy. And the African pygmies would carve a bamboo flute that plays only one note, and they would play the flute, and then they would sing around the note that's playing. So we're the note that everybody's going to sing around. It's very simple. Polly, may we have a C, please? So in any octave that's comfortable for you, sing, the words are breathe in, breathe out, and we say that twice, and then we're going to do stuff on top of it, all right? So, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, just keep doing it, breathe out,
Thank you, Charlie. I'd now like to invite our guest for today to lead us in guided meditation. It's Kotatsu John Bailes Roshi. Please join us.
Good morning. Isn't it nice that it's 35 degrees? I would like to lead us in a short guided meditation. And if it's possible for us, if we could sit up straight in our pews with our feet flat on the floor and our shoulders over our pelvis. Our eyes at about a 60-degree angle, downward cast, with a gentle gaze, not focused on anything in particular. And breathing through our nose. We might take 1 or 2 deeper breaths. And I'd like us to become aware of the physical sensation of breathing, the effect of the inhalation in our lungs, in our chest, in our nostrils, and bring our attention to that physical sensation as we continue to pay attention to our breath, to give our attention to our breath and to that physical sensation. Giving ourselves a gift, being generous with ourself and our breath. And now I'd like us to take our right hand and place the palm on our diaphragm. And as we continue to pay close attention to our breathing, becoming aware of the rise and fall of our diaphragm as we breathe in and we breathe out. And bringing our full attention to that place where the palm of our hand rests on our diaphragm. And just allowing ourselves, our awareness, to rise and fall with the diaphragm as we breathe. Not trying to manipulate our breath, not trying to breathe slower or faster or deeper, just our breath as it is. And whatever thoughts, feelings, sensations we're experiencing, just allowing them to be, not pushing them away, not trying to clear things away, and not trying to analyze. Just rise and fall with our diaphragm. And whatever restlessness or discomfort we might experience, just being willing to be present with that for this couple of minutes. Generously giving our attention to our breath and allowing ourselves to be present to whatever is occurring at this very moment. The very physicalness, the very sensation of breathing, of our breath. A gentleness and a kindness for ourselves and for the space around us. Just letting everything be. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. So we're just going to have a few moments just to talk a little bit about Buddhism, what you do. Could you maybe, Buddhism is it's kind of a big question of, can you just tell us a little bit about Buddhism for people who might be unfamiliar?
Buddhism. The original human being, known as the Buddha, Shakyamuni, was born in the 6th century BC in southern Nepal near the Ganges River. The story goes he was born to a royal family, and he was a prince. And the story goes that he never went outside his compound, and all the luxuries available in the world were available to him right there. And one day, with his trusty aide, he went out and he saw a poor and starving person. And he'd never seen someone starving. And he asked his aide, "What was that?" And he said, "That is a suffering, starving person." And then he went out a second time, and he saw an old person. And he'd never seen an old person before. And he asked his aide what that was, and he said, "Old age." And then he went out another time, and he saw a dead person. And he asked his aide what that was. And he said, "A dead person." All of these three experiences rattled Shakyamuni. And he wanted to get to the root of suffering, as the story goes. And he left his compound in the middle of the night to go do various, we'll call them yogic practices of the time. And for a number of years he practiced and had no sense of freedom. And then one day he said, "I'm going to sit down under this tree, known as the Bo tree, the Bodhi tree, and until I have deep insight into the human condition, I'm not going to move." So he sat there and followed his breath, as we were doing. And somewhere along the way, this being known as Mara, who represented all sort of temptation and evil and so on and so forth, came to assail him. And what he realized about Mara was that this being was all his own projections. These fears and so on. And once he saw through Mara in this way, Mara disappeared. And as the story goes, at the same time that, well, just before this, he says to Mara, "I and all being are awake." I and all being, this is very important. Not just I'm awake. And then Mara says, "Show me a witness." And Shakyamuni points down to the earth and says, "With the earth as my witness, I and all beings are awake." And Mara vanishes. And he's free of the burden of all the projection and sense of guilt and so on. And he's quite aware all beings establishes the Buddhist, some call it a concept, but it's literally a deep experience of interdependence of all being, of all life. And that's the root of the beginning of the teaching of Buddhism, 2,600 years ago, I guess it is now. And from that moment, he took, I think it was, I'll say 49 days, deciding what he should do with this knowledge, whether he should go forth and teach and so on. But he'd made a deal with friends who were on the same path or similar path, that if they all made a deal, if they saw something, if they had some deep insight, they would meet and share. So he did, and he shared his experience, and the other four became his first disciples. And they began to practice, and people began to see in that time wandering mendicants would hold public court, so to speak, and have philosophical debates and religious debates throughout various villages and cities. And people began to listen to his teaching. And it spread further and further throughout India. And then, of course, over time, into Central Asia, and across into China and Tibet and Korea, Japan, and now here in the West, both America, Europe, and even our friends in South America, and Africa. So, a long history.
Can you tell us a little bit about your name?
Well, my name, it's an embarrassing name. The name Kotatsu is, Kotatsu Roko is my ordination name and my empowerment, if you will, as a Zen teacher name. It means, embarrassingly in English, immense arrival, brilliant disclosure. So it's like, oh my God. Yeah. And the title, Roshi, literally means old man. And that has to do with being in the presence or in a culture where old age and experience is respected and considered of deep value. Yeah.
And I was wondering about the bowl that you use to start the meditation and end it. Can you tell us about that and why, what the significance of beginning and ending the meditation practice?
Yeah, the Dharma bell. This is the peal of the Dharma bell throughout the universe, resonating, bringing people's attention right here. I wouldn't think it's too different from a church bell. I wouldn't think it's too different from, in Christian Europe 500 years ago, 400 years ago, the time, the day, how should I say, the periods of the day were recognized by the peals of the bells in the church or the cathedral. And it was sort of, that sound was the center of people's lives, or the resonance that sort of rang through space and joined people. But likewise in China and Japan and Korea, temple bells resonate. Well, they resonated throughout the valleys and so on, and gave people that similar sense of connection in space.
Thank you so much. I think we're gonna have more time to talk with you after we split up into our breakout sessions. So I really appreciate you sharing your information here with us today.
You're welcome.
And I think we'll now invite Kate up to talk about our offering.
Good morning. This is the part in our service where we will receive our offering. This week, our offering will go towards the life and work of First Parish. If you would like to give, please go to our website, www.uyugualan.org/give. So if you're in the sanctuary, the basket will be coming along. And if you are here for your first time, we ask you that you pass the basket by. You are our honored guest. Thank you.
Thank you to the choir for that lovely rendition of that song. It's one of my favorite poems, so thank you for that. A reminder that today is our RE for everyone, so we are going to have 2 breakout sessions. We have one here in the sanctuary, and that's where the online breakout session will be as well. That'll be a conversation between I'm sorry, I'm trying to get make sure I'm not saying it. Kotatsu, is that right? John Bailes, Roshi, and myself, and we'll be taking questions from the audience as well. And then Kate Holland's going to lead a separate breakout room that might be a little more kid-friendly. They're going to go over some mindfulness practices and then also make mala. So those are the 2 options today. I will leave you with a reading from Sam Trumbore. It says, "Go forth in simplicity. Find and walk the path that leads to compassion and wisdom, that leads to happiness, peace, and ease. Welcome the stranger and open your heart to a world in need of healing. Be courageous before the forces of hate. Hold and embody a vision of the common good that serves the needs of all people. Blessed be." Okay, so we're just going to continue our conversation here today and also invite questions from the audience. I do have wipes so that I can wipe up the microphone, so if you are concerned about that. But I have a question first off. I feel like the word karma is so often sort of thrown around in our culture now, and I'm wondering if we could get from you what that actually means. Like, what is the Buddhist meaning of karma?
If I'm correct, there's a coffee roaster nearby that has karma in its name. And they're a pretty good roaster, too. Karma literally translates, or can be literally translated, we'll just put it like that, as action. Karma in Buddhism is not destiny. We could say it's the sum of how we are exactly as we are at this moment. And The major point of Buddhism is that as we pay more and more close attention, give our attention to this moment, the trajectory of our actions can be changed. Sort of like a particular node, we can make a different decision about how we are. We can have insight into all the causes and conditions that brought us to be as we are, and actually have a sense, like when our friend the Buddha said, "Tamara, I understand you." He freed himself from the burden of that destiny, if you will. And in each moment, as we pay attention, and as we are loving and kind and generous, as we pay close attention to our breath, the nature of the connection of our actions and our relationships with people may have a feeling of more space. And we're not just habituated, we're just not falling into our habituated actions. So there's always the opportunity to break the chain, so to speak, of causation in Buddhism.
Does anybody have a question? Oh, I've got it. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
When I first went off to Catholic seminary in the 80s, I got turned on to Thomas Merton,
Yeah.
who then kind of turned me on to Thich Nhat Hanh Thai.
Yeah.
And throughout my times, I stayed as a practicing Catholic through that ministry. But Buddhism spoke a lot to me. Could you speak how Buddhism can maybe enhance our spiritual practice, enhance our religious practice, but not necessarily becoming a Buddhist?
Yeah. So the point of practicing Buddhism is not to be a Buddhist, period. It's that simple. My teacher, Suzuki Roshi, used to say, I don't care if you're a Buddhist, if you're a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim, practice Zazen and you'll be a better Christian, Jew, or Muslim. Today, as I was coming here, or before I came here, a meme on Instagram had our friend, the Dalai Lama, right? Saying that we don't practice Buddhism to be a Buddhist. We practice Buddhism to be what we are completely. And that's the nature of the giving our attention that we speak about, the generosity of actually giving our attention to the present moment, freeing us from the burden, shall I say, of the weight of our projections about what Catholicism is. The nature of, as a young man, I had a very wonderful experience when I was at a Zen monastery in California. A man by the name of Brother David Stendelrast, who's now in his 90s and has a website that's spectacular about gratitude. And we were practicing together and doing the forms and having some conversation, and it became very clear that the experience of this space, say, of the Buddha, or what we might experience in our life, is a sense, in Buddhism we call it luminous emptiness, shunyata, was in fact very similar to the Christian experience of grace in the moment. And it very much had to do with practice. It didn't have to do with theological interpretation. And this is very important. So devotion to the practice is, rather than devotion to the concepts, is what yields transformation and opens the moment. And that's what the practice of Buddhism is all about. Yeah. Does that help? Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
I think I saw some hands over in that direction.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Last month, we were considering the aspects of Hinduism, and I was wondering if you could sort of compare the concept of the oneness of being between Buddhism and Hinduism, and also the concepts of samsara, reincarnation, with the achieving of nirvana.
Mm-hmm. Well, in Mahayana Buddhism, samsara is nirvana. Paying attention to this very moment in what we think is our relative life or our stuck life is our freedom. This is very hard for us because we always think that it's someplace else. But it's literally right where we are in our body, within our projections and thoughts, within our limited capacity to actually conceive what is. And it's a trust and a faith in the moment that releases us from the confines of our concept of karma, rebirth, so on and so forth. Buddhism, in many ways, can be described as a direct response to what we branded Hinduism in India. Hinduism didn't exist in India, right? It's a colonialist interpretation. It's a theological determination of what a religion is, or an academic, scholastic idea of religion, which was, nobody thought they were a Buddhist in, say, 600 BC. They were listening to someone and following the teachings of someone, but they didn't call themselves Buddhists or Buddhism. And this is a very key element to the practice of Buddhism. Buddhism becomes a skillful means, sort of like a signpost to bring people to a place and a practice that we can all recognize what our friend Thich Nhat Hanh called interbeing, which is the root of the interdependence of all life. All life, including rocks and rivers and oceans. And to make decisions based in that interdependence, in that interbeing, that morality and ethics emerge from that experience. It's not a conceived order. In Buddhism, everything's not one. We only need to look around the room. Huh? I'm not you. You're not me. And this is important. No flower, even though it could be a rose, and even the rose of the same variety, is not the same flower. We all come to life based on, or how shall I say, nourished and fed by, or not, by the causes and conditions of our life, by the soil and the sun and the moisture, by the love or lack thereof in our lives. So although we're all human beings and we're all expressions of life, we're not one. And the difference, we all come from, we're all made up of the same stuff. We're even made up of the same stuff as trees and rocks. In the basic elements of Buddhist meditation, yoga, earth, air, fire, water, and space. And part of meditation is actually experiencing ourselves in this way, which then brings interdependence to life in a way that reveals both our interdependence, which means, how shall I say, we are necessary for each other's lives, as the trees are necessary for us and vice versa. And we're responsible to one another in that way, and yet an oak tree in a different place is a different oak tree. Does that help? Yeah. Yeah. So this is a very profound, how shall I say, learning in Zen particularly. The relationship between sameness and difference. So often when people begin to practice, they identify with their teacher and want to be with their teacher and be their teacher. But at a certain point, the teacher forces them back on themselves and realizes that they're different and forces them into the realization of difference and the necessity of standing in our own causes and conditions and allowing that to speak and come to fruition. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'll not interrupt that way.
Welcome to our congregation here.
Thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned Zen Buddhism,
Mm-hmm.
and we had the honor of having a Tibetan Buddhist live with us
Uh-huh.
when he came to the United States
Among?
and now lives here permanently as a
Yeah.
citizen. And I understand their focus is a little different.
Well, they're different schools, but literally, Tibetan Buddhism and Zen have deep roots back to, like, the beginning of Buddhism in Tibet, which I think is around 500 AD. So that the nature of meditation and the nature of basis in what's called the Prajna Paramita literature is the same. And there are two divisions within the Tibetan schools. The Gelugpa, which is the Dalai Lama's form, are more scholastic and more analytical in their basis and understanding and forms of Buddhism. The Nyingma and the Kagyu are more meditation-based, more meditation experience-based. So this gets technical, but the Gelugpa interpretation of emptiness is analytical. The Kagyu and the Nyingma, as the Zen, are experiential. And they both share the same basis. Is that? Yeah. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you talk to us about the role of charity and charitable works with a Buddhist practice?
This is the one. It says only love. Charity is love. Charity is an I give something to you, therefore I'm good. Charity is love expressing itself. Generosity in Buddhism is the first of the 6 perfections in the Mahayana tradition. There's generosity, discipline, decorum, patience. Patience is huge. Energy, concentration, and then wisdom. But it's all subsumed in generosity. And the nature of being able to, for instance, give our complete attention to our diaphragm rising and falling can carry throughout our life, which allows, how shall I say, the perfection of giving is the realization and the experience in the process that there is no giver, there is no gift, and there is no recipient. There's nothing to mark that I did this. There's just the fulfillment of the generosity. And that fulfillment, that perfection, if you will, that seemingly transcendent generosity is the entrance, the opening, if you will, of luminous emptiness, or I'll use a term that's more familiar to us, grace, the space of grace in that generosity. And I believe, literally from what I've read, if I can remember, that the translation of the Bible into Greek that word used to be love, and didn't have the connotation of charity like we give to the poor and we're better off, and we're good because we give to the poor. There's no merit in Buddhism, although people strive to act well so they have good merit. But the good merit really is when we let go of measuring, and then our life begins to turn around. But we should share. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Is that helpful? Is there more? Or?
I'm just thinking that might not be as comforting to the very poor.
Love includes blankets and food and shelter and education and health care, period. That we live in a society that denies the poor, in my mind, is homicidal. This is the nature of interdependence. Everything, in that sense, human beings are equal. No one is better. This, in the Western world, relates to Nietzsche's genealogy of morality, in which he analyzes how the justification for having more than others.
I have a question over here.
Hi, thank you so much for being here today. My question is, I was wondering if you could comment on the story that you read and sort of the concept of illusion in there. I think it sort of can be tempting to think that it's saying there is no aging, there is no sickness, it's all just in your mind, it's all just an illusion. But what is really the illusion there? I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking that it's the stories that we tell about those concepts, and it's conceptual.
Exactly. How we mediate the suffering. How we tell a story that separates us from it. Whereas if we allow ourselves to the best of our capacity, a non-mediated experience, it affects directly how we respond from the form of charity, healthcare, food, education, so on and so forth. It changes how we relate to what we in this world call private assets. In the Buddhist world, there are no private assets. It's not communism, but there's complete sharing. Yeah. Is that helpful? Yeah? Okay.
I have kind of a basic question about meditation, because it seems like that's a key Buddhist practice. Would you say that's correct?
One would say that, yes.
I think sometimes that can be a barrier for some people. How do you quiet your mind? Do you have any advice on people who have difficulty with just the concept of meditation, or how to get a regular practice
It's
going?
kind of wild. At Wellesley, I teach mindfulness, right? So some of my mindfulness classes, we have students with ADHD, and they're sort of like... So what we find is there's no pressure to be stuck still and hold, but they have this idea that it's they have to hold themselves still. But literally, the project here is to begin to relate to our motion in a way that brings us to awareness, rather than to be frightened of it. So it's hard to understand, when you first begin meditation and you sit still, that literally it's impossible to sit still. Literally, our diaphragm is moving all the time. Our heart is beating. There's expansion and contraction of our ribs and our spine. And what we're literally doing, and there's movement in our organs, and our diaphragm is massaging our organs. All of this awareness comes alive in meditation. And as that comes alive in meditation, it changes how we move through space, how we relate to one another, and so on. What the children and some adults are doing downstairs right now. So when I did the guided meditation with the diaphragm, what happens here, as our science friends tell us, is this awareness of our diaphragm activates our vagus nerve. Our vagus nerve, which, excuse me for generalities, comes from the back center of our brain and connects all aspects of our organs and our body, our heart, spine, so on and so forth. And supposedly brings information back to the brain. But this process of becoming aware of our diaphragm activates the parasympathetic nervous system as well. Most of us in the modern world live in the sympathetic nervous system, which is our adrenaline and cortisol. What's out there? What's going to happen? Am I going to be able to retire? What about health care? Who's going to pay for college education? Who's going to do what, when, and how? And have I done it right? Have I done it wrong? Will I have a job when I show up on Monday morning, you know? How will my health be? We're worried about these things all the time. The parasympathetic nervous system, literally this breathing, changes our nervous system. We begin to enter the parasympathetic world. Acetylcholine, and even this breathing relaxes our belly, and the neurotransmitters in our belly ship serotonin to our brain. Our heart rate slows, our blood pressure drops a bit, our respiration rate drops, our variable heart rate gets stronger, all sorts of things. Our sense of resilience and buoyancy, mental and physical. It's a very nourishing practice occur in meditation. So back to the children downstairs, making malas or stringing beads or drawing or whatever they're doing. These types of crafts, like knitting and sewing, bring this type of awareness into our body. And if you've ever, my wife has a sewing group every other Sunday, and I sit with them. Sometimes I sit through, but the nature of their relationship and their conversation while sewing or knitting or patching, mending clothing it's really a beautiful space. It's not a space where one person is bringing in their idea about how to do this and another the other. There's this sense of when we're paying attention with our hand-eye coordination and doing something that we can begin to do without, here's a knitter. We actually are listening with a different way of being. And we're responding to people with a different way of being. Our sense of self and separation has changed. And when we do this type of breathing, our hand-eye coordination actually gets better. It's not like, all of a sudden we're a tennis pro, but we actually have pleasure. We can have pleasurable sensation in washing the dishes. Once we put, my God, I always have to wash the dishes away, push those thoughts away. Or let those thoughts go as you begin to feel the warm water and the soap and so on. And this is very important to develop what I'll call these type of practices in our life, whatever they might be. Yeah. And many traditional cultures, of course, this is central to their cultural expression. And not so much for we moderns, who most of it is head stuff.
We're right at time, so let's have one final question.
Thank you for being with us. Some of your thoughts about coping with hate in ourselves and in others?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how part of this bringing our attention into our body generously, gently, kindly, lovingly, kindly, metta, is very important with each breath, bringing that into our body, becoming friends literally with ourselves and our limitations and our difficulties of sitting still for 5 minutes. There's another, there's a 13th century Japanese Zen master by the name of Eihei Dogen, who's just an incredible luminary, but he wrote one essay called the Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva means awakening being, awakening as a verb. You and I are awakening beings. And the degree to which we pay attention to that awakening, we're also helping others awaken. One of the guidance is kind speech. So who do we have the most conversations with? Who do you talk with most often? Yeah. And how kind are we to ourselves? My Wellesley students aren't very kind to themselves. They're always pushing and always worried and always anxious that they're not good enough. They always think, I'm the stupid one here. And none of them are stupid. But so first we develop this kindness, this kind speech for ourselves. But a way of developing kind speech for ourselves is also, as Dogen says in the last sentence of his essay, he says, kind speech can change the fate of nations. So literally, not giving expression to hate and rage is a discipline that can transform us. But we're not talking, as Suzuki Roshi used to say, neither to repress nor to express. And this is part of what meditation practice and the nature of, so there's generosity, and then there's the discipline, decorum, the way of bearing and being with one another that maybe sets limits on the degree to which we can express our hate, and provides us a situation where we actually experience the effect of an emotion like hate or fear on our own body and our own mind and on the people around us who we may love the most. Which then, how shall I say, puts us in a sort of crucible of our own stew. And much of Buddhist practice is about, it's sort of like sitting on the stove and creating a stock. And all the juices are coming out and melding together and mixing. And it's a process of allowing that to happen. And this takes great patience because we always want to move to action. We always want to feel love. We don't want to feel hate. And there we are. Hate. Wow. This is wreaking havoc with my body and my mind. What can I do? But this is the space where we begin to see, if we pay close attention, we begin to see hate and love are deeply related. They're deeply related to something else in Buddhism, which is a fear of our insubstantiality and a fear of our, quote, survival, and the things that we identify with fixedly surviving. So in the Heart Sutra, which is a seminal text in Mahayana Buddhism, it says something to the effect of, when the Bodhisattva sees through all of these projections, like Mara, our own projections, there is no fear. And when there is no fear, how shall I say, the nature of the fear is not controlling us. It's not like we shouldn't be frightened if our house is burning. We should probably get out of the house. But we don't have all the emotional baggage of fear on top of fear. And that's a key element here. And much of hate is driven by fear. The other aspect of that is literally, in the Buddhist world, once you have complete faith or trust, there is absolutely no possibility of betrayal that can undermine you. And this is a realization that really changes life, because we don't wander around suspicious. And even if someone did, in a sort of relative form, as it's all relative to betrayal, do that, it doesn't destroy our life and our, what the Japanese call our ikigai, which is, shall I say, our purpose for being. And one of the biggest elements in Zen and in Mahayana Buddhism is our vow. And once our life is given over to our vow, everything changes. Hate simmers down, anxiety simmers down, and fear simmers down. Because we're no longer being thrown around by our habitual modes of response. Sort of like the black box, My wife criticizes me for how poorly I'm washing the dishes, and I go, "What do you mean?" But it's as simple as that, Here I am practicing. I'll tell you a story. This will be just a minute. So at a certain period in my life, I left the Zen community, and I went off and returned to university, got my degrees, and went into the financial services industry. And this is after about 20 some odd years of practicing Buddhism, right? We're off at a team building, quote, team building retreat. And we're in a small group. And the idea of part of this small group, as I remember it now, it's so long ago, it's like 1987, was we are to give one another t-shirt names. So here I am, having practiced Buddhism since 1970, and it's 1987, having been ordained, so on and so forth. And what is the name they come up with for me? Dr. Disdain. Which was like, oh my God. So, that habituation continues, and people help us see it, if we're lucky. So why so disdainful? What was I frightened of? Why did it come across as it did? Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much for sharing your teachings and your lessons with us today. And I appreciate you all asking such wonderful, insightful questions.